The Stars We Took by Force, an Intergalactic HFY War. Prologue, a flicker in the void. Humanity's climb to the stars was one of dreams and desperation. Centuries of war and innovation on Earth had honed their resilience, but when the United Earth Federation, UEF, first stepped beyond their solar system, they were a grain of sand in a galaxy filled with giants. For a time, Earth had been content to be a lesser player in the great galactic chessboard. The Andralians, cold and calculating beings of superior intellect and advanced technology, had accepted Earth into their fold as a tributary. In exchange for a semblance of peace, humanity provided energy, raw materials, and scientific labor to the Union. It worked. Until it didn't. The first sign of trouble came when the Andralians raised the tribute demand by 300%. The colonies couldn't sustain the rate of extraction, and when humanity resisted, the Andralians didn't negotiate. They retaliated. New Jakarta was the first to burn. The colony had been a jewel of human innovation, its cities gleaming under an artificial atmosphere, its surface lush with Earth-like greenery. When the Andralians bombarded it from orbit, they left nothing but ash and radioactive craters. Captain Darius Voss had stood among the ruins that day. The screams of survivors had echoed in his mind long after the fires were extinguished. That was the moment the United Earth Federation declared independence, and the Andralians declared war. Part 1 of the Call to Arms. Chapter 1. A Spark of Defiance. The war room aboard UEF Command Station Epsilon was abuzz with activity. Holographic displays flickered with maps of Andralian space, tactical projections, and casualty reports. Officers in crisp UEF uniforms moved with purpose, their faces lined with exhaustion but alight with determination. Darius stood at the head of the room, his presence commanding. At 6 feet tall, with a lean frame and sharp blue eyes that could pierce through any facade, he was a man who inspired loyalty. His dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was cropped close in military fashion. "This is where we fight back," Admiral Calderon declared, gesturing to a hologram of the Tanith system. "The Andralians think we're too weak to resist. Let's show them how wrong they are." The Tanith system was the site of an Andralian supply convoy. 6 freighters carried vital materials to the front lines, escorted by 2 destroyers. It was a tempting target, but also a dangerous one. Darius studied the map, his jaw tightening. The convoy is vulnerable, but they'll respond quickly. If we hit them, we'll need to strike hard and disappear before reinforcements arrive. Calderon nodded. "You'll have the Resolute and 2 escorts. Take the convoy, capture what you can, and destroy the rest." "Understood," Darius replied. As he left the war room, he found Lieutenant Joran Hale waiting for him. Hale was young, with sandy blonde hair and a perpetually eager expression, but he had earned his place as the Resolute's tactical officer. "Think we can pull it off, Captain?" Hale asked. "We have to," Darius said, his voice steady. "If we don't, we might not get another chance." Chapter 2. The Ambush. The Resolute emerged from hyperspace like a predator slipping into a darkened room. Around it, the void stretched endlessly, dotted with the cold light of distant stars. "Status report," Darius ordered as he settled into the captain's chair. "L systems nominal," Ensign Raphael Patel replied from the helm. "We're running dark. The convoy shouldn't detect us unless we get too close." "Good," Darius said. "Hale, what's our target range?" Hale studied the tactical display. "The freighters will enter our firing range in 5 minutes. Escorts are flanking them. Standard formation." "Standard formation," Darius muttered. "They're getting sloppy. They think we're no threat." The bridge crew worked in tense silence as the convoy drew closer. Every creak of the ship, every flicker of the displays seemed magnified in the quiet. Darius felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was humanity's first offensive strike. If they failed, it would embolden the Andralians and demoralize the UEF. Conovel was in range, Hale reported. Darius leaned forward, his voice sharp. Fire at will. The Resolute's railguns roared to life, unleashing kinetic slugs at hypersonic speeds. The lead destroyer's shields flared brilliantly as the slugs struck, the energy barrier collapsing under the onslaught. The destroyer fractured into flaming debris, its crew obliterated before they could react. The second destroyer responded immediately, plasma bolts streaking toward the Resolute. Evasive maneuvers, Darius barked. Patel pushed the Resolute into a tight roll, the plasma bolts skimming past the ship's hull. Meanwhile, the escort ships targeted the freighters, disabling their engines with surgical precision. Within minutes, the convoy was incapacitated. Boarding teams, move in, Darius ordered. Marines launched from the Resolute in assault pods, their streamlined vessels attaching to the freighter's hulls like parasites. Through the tactical display, Darius watched as the Marines breached the freighters, securing their cargo and capturing any surviving crew. Cargo secured, came the voice of Commander Alina Kerr, the leader of the boarding teams. Good work, Darius said. Bring them back. We're leaving before their reinforcements arrive. The Resolute and its escorts vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of Andralian pride. Chapter 3. The Retaliation. The fallout from the attack on the Andralian convoy was swift and brutal. Within days, reconnaissance drones reported the arrival of a massive Andralian fleet in the Tanith system. The United Earth Federation's Tactical Council met in a high-separation orbital command station to address the growing crisis. Captain Darius Voss sat at the central table, his presence a steadying force amidst the tension that filled the room. Holographic displays showed the Andralian fleet's size and trajectory. Over 50 ships, destroyers, carriers, and at least one battleship were heading for UF-held space. They're not just retaliating for the convoy, Admiral Calderon began, his voice hard. They're trying to send a message. They want to make an example of us. They underestimated us once, they won't do it again, said Rear Admiral Tanaka, a short, wiry woman with sharp features. If they overwhelm Tanith, they'll have a straight shot to New Jakarta's reconstruction zones. We need to stop them here. Darius leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. We can't win in a direct engagement. Not against those numbers. Our best option is to evacuate Tanith and regroup at Kalanis Station. From there, we can draw them into a trap. Calderon frowned. You're suggesting we cede territory without a fight? I'm suggesting we fight smarter, Darius replied. If we try to hold Tanith, we'll lose more than the system. We'll lose ships and people we can't afford to replace. The council fell silent as they weighed his words. Calderon eventually nodded. You're right. We'll evacuate non-combat personnel and prepare defensive fallback positions. The fleet will regroup at Kalanis. The fall of Tanith. The evacuation of Tanith was a somber affair. Civilians were loaded onto transport ships, their faces a mix of fear and anger. Darius oversaw the operation personally, his presence reassuring the frightened colonists. You're not abandoning us, are you? An elderly woman asked as she shuffled aboard a transport ship. Never, Darius said, kneeling to meet her gaze. We're making sure you're safe. When the time comes, we'll take back what's ours. The woman nodded, clutching her belongings tightly as she boarded. As the last transport ship left the system, the Andralian fleet arrived. Their ships were sleek and deadly, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the Tanith star. The Resolute and its escorts remained behind to cover the evacuation. Enemy ships are locking weapons, Lieutenant Joran Hale reported from the tactical station. They're targeting the civilian transports. Intercept those plasma bolts, Darius barked. Divert all power to forward shields. The Resolute surged forward, its shields absorbing the brunt of the Andralian attack. Smaller UEF ships flanked the transports, using their own shields to protect the vulnerable vessels. "Shields at 50%, Ensign Raphael Patel shouted from the helm. "We can't take much more of this." "Hold steady," Darius ordered. "We're almost clear." The last of the transports jumped to hyperspace, but the cost was high. Several UEF frigates were destroyed, their wreckage scattering into the void. The Resolute barely escaped, its hull scarred and its systems on the verge of collapse. Regrouping at Colonus. At Colonus Station, the mood was grim. The loss of Tanith weighed heavily on the fleet, and the realization of the Andralians' overwhelming power was inescapable. Darius stood on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The crew could feel his frustration, even if he kept it buried beneath a composed exterior. Commander Elena Kerr joined him, her expression sympathetic. "They hit us hard. But the evacuation was a success. You saved thousands of lives." Darius sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "It's not enough. We're reacting to them, playing their game. If we keep this up, they'll bleed us dry." Kerr leaned against the railing beside him. "Then change the game. You've done it before. That's why they follow you." Her words gave him pause. He turned to face her, his resolve hardening. "We need to go on the offensive, hit them where it hurts." Expanded Chapter 4, The Battle of Vilaris. The Vilaris shipyard was one of the Andralian Union's most important fleet production hubs. Spanning over 300 kilometers, it housed dozens of construction bays, repair facilities, and weapons depots. Destroying it would cripple the Andralian war machine, but it was heavily defended. The UF's strike group emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vilaris sector. The Resolute led 2 frigates and a single destroyer, while a squadron of Zerathian fighters provided additional firepower. Darius stood on the bridge, his sharp gaze fixed on the tactical display. The shipyard's defenses were formidable: automated turrets, shield generators, and a fleet of Andralian warships patrolling the perimeter. "Hale, what's the status of their fleet?" Darius asked. 7 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and a carrier, Hale replied. "They haven't spotted us yet." Darius's mind raced. They couldn't win a head-on fight, but brute force wasn't the plan. "We'll split their forces. Send the frigates and Zerathian fighters to the far side of the shipyard. Make it look like a larger fleet. When they engage, we'll punch through their weakened defenses." As the decoy forces moved into position, Darius addressed the crew. "This isn't just a raid. This is about sending a message. They think we're weak. Let's show them what humanity can do." The assault. The decoy forces began their attack, drawing the Andralian fleet away from the shipyard. Darius watched the tactical display as enemy ships moved to intercept. "They've taken the bait," Hale said. "We've got a clear path." "Full speed ahead," Darius ordered. "Target their shield generators." The Resolute and its escorts surged forward, railguns and plasma cannons firing in unison. The shipyard's automated defenses sprang to life, but Darius's fleet moved with precision, evading turret fire while targeting critical systems. On board the Resolute, Commander Kerr led a team of Marines to the hangar bay. They boarded dropships, their faces grim but determined. "We've trained for this," Kerr said, addressing her team. "Stay sharp, stay focused. We hit them hard and fast." The dropships launched, streaking toward the shipyard. The Marines breached the facility, encountering fierce resistance from Andralian security forces. Plasma bolts flew through the air as the Marines fought their way to the central reactor. "The charges are set," Kerr reported over the comms. "We're extracting now." "Understood," Darius replied. "Hale, prepare for detonation." As the Marines returned to their dropships, the charges detonated, ripping through the shipyard's core. Explosions cascaded across the structure, and the once mighty facility began to collapse. "Mission accomplished," Kerr said as the Marines reboarded the Resolute. Darius allowed himself a small smile. "Let's get out of here." The strike group jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a trail of Andralian destruction. Chapter 5: A Fragile Alliance. The destruction of the Vilaris shipyard sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Andralians, for all their arrogance, had suffered a humiliating blow at the hands of humanity, a species they had dismissed as insignificant. But Darius Voss, captain of the Resolute, knew this was no time to celebrate. The Andralians would regroup, their fury boiling over into devastating retaliation. To stand a chance against their inevitable onslaught, humanity needed allies. The Zerathian hegemony, an empire of warlike beings with a long-standing grudge against the Andralian Union, was the obvious choice. A journey to Kalviez, the Zerathian capital world, Kavos, was a planet unlike anything Darius had ever seen. From orbit, it appeared as a dark sphere wrapped in crimson clouds, its surface illuminated by the glow of countless cities. Vast black spires rose like jagged teeth from the ground, linked by glowing bridges and atmospheric highways. The entire planet exuded an aura of power and menace. The Resolute docked at an orbital station where Darius and a small delegation were escorted by Zerathian guards. The guards were massive, towering over the humans, their scaled armor reflecting the dim light of the station. "Captain Voss," one of the guards said, its voice deep and guttural. "Supreme Commander Kale Vryn awaits you. Do not waste his time." The delegation was led through the labyrinthine corridors of the station to a grand hall. The walls were adorned with banners bearing Zerathian sigils, symbols of conquest and honor. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a throne of black stone, was Supreme Commander Kale Vryn. Kale Vryn was an imposing figure, even by Zerathian standards. His armor was ornately crafted, etched with the marks of countless victories. His piercing yellow eyes bore into Darius as the human captain approached. "You are the human who crippled the Velorith shipyard," Vryn said, his voice resonating through the hall. "I am," Darius replied, meeting Vryn's gaze without flinching. The Zerathian commander leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "And now you come to me, seeking aid. Tell me, Captain Voss, why should the Zerathian hegemony risk its fleets for your people?" Darius's mind raced. The Zeraiths respected strength above all else, and he needed to appeal to that. "Yeah, the Andralios have long been your enemies," Darius began. "For centuries, they've sought to undermine your sovereignty and expand their control. Humanity has dealt them a significant blow, but we cannot finish this war alone. Together, we can destroy them." Vryn's lips curled into a faint smile. "You speak of unity, yet your species is weak and divided. Why should we believe you can fight at our side?" Darius stepped closer, his voice unwavering. "Because we have no choice. Humanity fights not for power, but for survival. That kind of desperation makes us dangerous. We've proven we can hurt the Andralians. With your strength and our ingenuity, we can end their reign." The hall fell silent as Vryn studied Darius. At last, he rose from his throne, his towering form casting a long shadow. "Very well, Captain Voss. The Zerathian hegemony will join your fight, but on our terms. Do not mistake our alliance for friendship. If you falter, we will not hesitate to abandon you." Darius nodded, understood. Cultural tensions. The Zerathian fleet was a sight to behold. Massive warships, bristling with weapons, formed an imposing armada, their designs sleek and deadly, but integrating the Zerathians into UEF operations proved to be a challenge. On board the Resolute, tensions ran high as human and Zerathian officers clashed over strategy. "You humans are too cautious," growled Commander Kryn, the Zerathian liaison to the UEF. "Victory demands boldness." "And recklessness leads to disaster," Lieutenant Hale shot back. "Our tactics are designed to minimize casualties." Darius intervened, his voice firm. Both caution and boldness have their place. Kryn, your fleet's strength is unmatched, but our smaller ships are better suited for surgical strikes. We need to work together if we're going to win this war. Kryn narrowed his eyes, but said nothing, acknowledging Darius' authority. As the days passed, mutual respect began to grow between the two sides. Zerathian officers admired humanity's resourcefulness, while UEF personnel marveled at the Zerathians' unwavering discipline and combat prowess. Planning the offensive. With the combined fleets of humanity and the Zerathians, the UEF began planning a major offensive. The target was the Andralian world of Melkorus, a key staging ground for their fleet operations. The mission would be risky, but if successful, it would cripple the Andralian war effort. Darius spent countless hours with his officers and Zerathian counterparts, devising a strategy that leveraged the strengths of both fleets. The Zerathian warships will draw their main fleet away from the planet, Darius explained during a briefing. Meanwhile, the UEF will launch a ground assault to secure their orbital defenses. Once the defenses are neutralized, we'll strike their command center. The room buzzed with tension as the plan was finalized. Darius addressed the assembled officers, his voice steady. This is our chance to turn the tide. We've bled for this war. We've lost friends, family, entire worlds. But now we have the strength to fight back. Let's show the Andralians that humanity will not be broken. The officers saluted, their resolve renewed. Chapter 6. The Battle for Melkors. The Allied fleets emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of the Melkorus system, their vast armada gliding into position like predators circling their prey. The Andralian forces stationed there were formidable. 2 battleships, a carrier, and over a dozen smaller warships patrolled the orbit of Melkorus, its surface bristling with defensive installations. Captain Darius Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the glow of tactical displays reflecting off his hardened features. Enemy forces detected, Lieutenant Joran Hale reported. 17 ships in total. Their carrier is central to the formation, likely coordinating their fleet movements. Darius nodded. That carrier is our priority. If we take it out, their fleet will be crippled. Hale, signal the Zerathian fleet. They're up first. Across the void, the Zerathian warships moved into position. Unlike the human vessels, which relied on speed and precision, the Zerathian ships were towering behemoths of destruction, bristling with heavy plasma cannons and missile arrays. Supreme Commander Kael Vryn led the charge aboard the Requiem, his flagship and a symbol of Zerathian dominance. Zerathian fleet engaging the enemy, Hale reported as plasma bolts streaked through space, slamming into the Andralian formation. The Andralian battleships returned fire, their concentrated volleys lighting up the void as the 2 fleets clashed. Prepare the second wave, Darius ordered. We move as soon as their lines weaken. The Resolute and its escort ships held position, waiting for their moment to strike. Darius watched the battle unfold, his hands gripping the railing of his command station. The Zerathians fought with ruthless efficiency, their sheer firepower overwhelming the Andralian defenses. They're breaking formation, Hale said, a note of excitement in his voice. The carrier is exposed. Darius's expression hardened. All ships, move in, target the carrier's engines. The Resolute surged forward, rail guns and missile batteries firing in unison. The Andralian carrier attempted to retreat, its escorts scrambling to intercept the human ships, but it was too late. The combined firepower of the UEF strike group and Zerathian fleet was relentless. Direct hit on their engine cluster, Ensign Patel called out. The carrier's shields are failing. Keep up the pressure, Darius commanded. We can't let them recover. As the Resolute closed in, Darius's tactical display lit up with a new alert. Incoming reinforcements, Hale said grimly. Andralian ships exiting hyperspace, at least 20 more. The ground is salt. While the battle raged above, UEF and Zyrathian ground forces launched their assault on Melchoris. Dropships descended through the planet's atmosphere, their hulls glowing red from re-entry. Commander Alina Kerr led the UEF Marines, her voice calm and authoritative over the comms. "Stay tight, stay focused. Our objective is the orbital defense grid. Take it out and the fleet can finish the job." The dropships landed amid heavy anti-aircraft fire, their hatches opening to reveal squads of Marines armed with pulse rifles and heavy ordnance. The Andralian defenders were waiting, their sleek combat drones moving with inhuman precision. "Contact at 2 o'clock!" Kerr shouted, her pulse rifle spitting plasma bolts as her squad took cover behind a shattered structure. "Frag out!" A grenade sailed through the air, detonating in a flash of light and shrapnel. The Andralian drones faltered, their ranks thinning as the Marines pushed forward. Meanwhile, Zyrathian shock troopers landed on the far side of the defense grid, their massive exosuits shrugging off enemy fire as they charged headlong into the fray. The Zyrathians fought with brutal efficiency, their melee weapons cleaving through Andralian defenders with ease. "Zyrathian forces have breached the southern perimeter," Kerr reported. "We're converging on the control center." As the Allied forces advanced, the resistance grew fiercer. The Andralian defenders deployed heavier drones and automated turrets, their firepower slowing the assault. Kerr's squad took cover behind a downed transport, pinned by withering fire. "Captain, we're taking heavy losses," Kerr shouted into her comm. "We need reinforcements." Tactical brilliance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Darius analyzed the battlefield. The Andralian reinforcements threatened to overwhelm the fleet, while the ground forces were locked in a brutal stalemate. "Hail, status on the ground assault," Darius asked. "Commander Kerr's team is pinned down," Pale replied. "They've made progress, but the Andralian defenses are tougher than we expected." Darius's mind raced. If the orbital defenses weren't neutralized, the fleet would be forced to retreat and the mission would fail. He made a decision. "Prepare the drop pods," Darius ordered. "I'm going down there." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed his words. "Captain, you can't—" Hale began, but Darius cut him off. "I can and I will. This mission depends on it. Hale, you have the con—" Without waiting for a reply, Darius left the bridge, his determination unwavering. Minutes later he was aboard a drop pod, its engines roaring as it launched toward the surface. The descent was harrowing, the pod shaking violently as it pierced the atmosphere. When the hatch opened, Darius emerged into chaos. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, and the ground was littered with the wreckage of drones and vehicles. He quickly located Kerr's position and sprinted toward her squad, his pulse rifle blazing. "Good to see you, Captain," Kerr said, a grin breaking through her grim demeanor. "Let's finish this," Darius replied. "What's our status?" "We've got a path to the control center, but it's heavily fortified," Kerr said. "If we can take it out, the grid goes offline." "Then we take it," Darius said. "Lead the way." With Darius and Kerr at the helm, the Marines rallied. The squad advanced through the ruins, clearing out drones and turrets with precise, coordinated strikes. Finally, they reached the control center, a towering structure bristling with defenses. "Explosives on the support beams," Darius ordered. "We bring it down." As the Marines set the charges, the Andralian defenders launched a desperate counterattack. Darius fought at the front, his pulse rifle cutting down drones as the charges were armed. "Detonation in 5, Kerr called out. 4, 3, 2, oh! The explosion tore through the structure, collapsing it in a cloud of fire and debris. The orbital defense grid went offline and a cheer erupted from the Marines. Victory at Melchoris. Above the planet, the Allied fleet pressed the advantage. With the defenses neutralized, the Zyrathian warships unleashed their full firepower, decimating the Andralian reinforcements. The Resolute delivered the final blow to the carrier, its railguns reducing the massive ship to a burning husk. "The Andralian fleet is retreating," Hale reported, relief evident in his voice. On the surface, Darius stood among the ruins, his armor scorched and his pulse rifle depleted. The cost had been high, but the mission was a success. Melchorus was theirs. As the Resolute returned to orbit, the crew greeted Darius with cheers and applause. He acknowledged them with a nod, but his mind was already on the next battle. "We've won this fight," he said to Kerr later, "but the war is far from over." Chapter 7. The Price of Victory. The battle for Melchorus was a resounding success. The destruction of the Andralian orbital defenses and the retreat of their fleet marked a critical turning point in the war. For the first time, humanity and its Zerathian allies had taken and held a strategically vital Andralian system. The celebrations aboard the Resolute were subdued, shadowed by the staggering cost of the victory. Captain Darius Voss sat alone in his quarters, staring at a holographic casualty report. Names scrolled endlessly across the display. Marines who'd fought alongside him, crew members lost in the orbital skirmish, and civilians caught in the crossfire. His chest tightened as he saw the faces of those he'd led into battle. A chime at the door broke his reverie. "Enter," he called, his voice hoarse. Commander Alina Kerr stepped inside, her armor replaced by a standard UEF uniform. She carried a bottle of amber liquid, the label written in one of Earth's forgotten languages. "Thought you could use this," Kerr said, setting the bottle on his desk. Darius gave a faint smile. "You've always known how to pick your moments." Kerr poured 2 glasses and sat across from him. "You're carrying the weight of the dead again, aren't you?" "It's hard not to," Darius admitted, staring into his glass. "We won today, but at what cost? We lost over 1,200 lives. How many more will it take before this war is over?" Kerr leaned forward, her gaze steady. "They knew what they signed up for, Darius. They believed in what we're fighting for. Don't dishonor their sacrifice by doubting yourself." Darius nodded, her words grounding him. "You're right. The dead deserve more than regret. They deserve victory." He downed his drink, the fire of the alcohol igniting something deeper within him. "Then let's make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain," he said, setting the glass down with resolve. The Andralian counteroffensive. The triumph at Melchorus was short-lived. Weeks later, Andralian reinforcements arrived in force. A fleet of unprecedented size, commanded by High Strategist Zelkorath, one of the Union's most feared tacticians, entered the system with one purpose: to retake Melchorus and crush the Allied resistance. The Resolute and its Allied fleets scrambled to prepare. In the command center on Melchorus, Darius met with Supreme Commander Kale Vryn and Admiral Calderon. "We're outnumbered 3-1, Calderon said grimly, pointing to the holographic display of the Andralian fleet. "They've brought 2 dreadnoughts, 5 carriers, and over 50 warships. We can't match that firepower." Vryn snarled, his yellow eyes narrowing. "We cannot retreat. To abandon this system would be to show weakness. Weakness invites annihilation." Darius studied the display, his mind racing. "We don't have to match their firepower," he said. "We just have to outmaneuver them." He outlined his plan. The Zerathian fleet would act as a shield, holding the bulk of the Andralian forces at bay. Meanwhile, the UEF ships would execute precision strikes against key targets, supply lines, carriers, and command ships. "It's a gamble," Calderon said, his tone skeptical. "It's the only way we win," Darius replied. Vryn nodded. "I will hold the line. See that your ships do not falter, Captain Voss." The battle begins. The Andralian fleet arrived in system like a tidal wave, their massive dreadnoughts blotting out the stars as they advanced. The Zerathian warships surged forward to meet them, plasma cannons and missile batteries blazing. The void erupted into chaos as the 2 fleets collided. On the Resolute, Darius coordinated the UEF's strike teams with surgical precision. "Hale, target the carrier on Vector 327, he ordered. "Patel, bring us within railgun range." The Resolute weaved through the battlefield, its railguns firing with deadly accuracy. A direct hit on the carrier's engine cluster sent it spiraling out of control, its escort ships scrambling to contain the damage. "Carrier is neutralized," Hale reported. "Good. Redirect fire to their supply ships," Darius said. "Cut off their reinforcements." The Resolute and its escorts targeted the Andralian supply lines, destroying fuel ships and munitions freighters. Explosions lit up the void as critical resources were obliterated. Vrin's stand. On the front line, Supreme Commander Vrin fought with unmatched ferocity. The Requiem led the Zirathian fleet in a brutal assault against the Andralian dreadnoughts, its plasma lances carving through enemy shields. "Concentrate fire on their flagship," Vrin roared, his voice carrying through the comms. The Zirathian ships obeyed, their coordinated firepower overwhelming the dreadnought's defenses. The massive ship shuddered under the onslaught before erupting in a blinding explosion. But the victory came at a cost. The Zirathian fleet was taking heavy losses, their ships outnumbered and outgunned. Vrin knew he could not hold the line indefinitely. "Captain Voss," Vrin said over the comms, his tone grave, "our losses are mounting. If you have a plan to end this, now is the time." Darius's gambit. Darius's plan relied on one final gamble. The Resolute would lead a strike team deep into the heart of the Andralian fleet to target high-strategic Zelkoroth's command ship. Without their leader, the Andralian forces would descend into chaos. "Hale, patch me through to the fleet," Darius said. The comms crackled as his voice carried to every allied ship. "This is Captain Voss. We've fought too hard and lost too much to give up now. The Andralian Union thinks they can crush us. Let's show them that humanity and our allies don't break, we endure. Follow me and let's finish this." The strike team advanced, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield. The Resolute took heavy fire, its shields flickering and its hull groaning under the strain, but Darius pressed on. "Target their command ship," he ordered, his voice unwavering. The tactical display lit up as the Resolute unleashed everything it had. Railgun slugs and missile barrages pounded the Andralian flagship, its shields collapsing under the relentless assault. On board the Andralian command ship, Zelkoroth realized too late that the tide had turned. The final volley from the Resolute struck the ship's reactor, triggering a catastrophic explosion. The Andralian fleet faltered, their formation breaking as confusion spread. The Allied forces seized the opportunity, routing the remaining ships and securing the system. Aftermath. The victory at Melkors came at a staggering cost. The Zirathian fleet was reduced to half its original size, and the UEF had lost countless ships and personnel. As Darius stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, staring at the wreckage floating in orbit, he felt the weight of every life lost. But he also felt hope. "We've done the impossible," Kerr said, joining him. "We've shown the galaxy that the Andralians can be beaten." Darius nodded. "This was just one battle, but it proves we're not helpless. Humanity and our allies, we've earned our place in the stars." Tensions in victory. The victory at Melkors rippled across the galaxy. News of the Andralian defeat spread like wildfire, inspiring hope among humanity's colonies and sending a warning to other subjugated races under Andralian rule. But the alliance between humanity and the Zirathian hegemony was not without strain. The losses suffered by the Zirathians at Melkors had not gone unnoticed by Supreme Commander Kale Vrin. Though the alliance had achieved its greatest victory yet, whispers of resentment circulated among the Zirathian fleet. Their honor-driven culture demanded retribution for perceived inequities, and many felt the humans had gained too much from their sacrifices. On board the Resolute, Darius Voss stood in the war room with Admiral Calderon and Supreme Commander Vryn. The holographic display showed the fleet's current position and the estimated movement of Andralian reinforcements. "We've dealt them a crippling blow," Calderon said, his tone triumphant. "Their supply lines are fractured, and their forces are spread thin. If we press the advantage, we can drive them out of this sector entirely." Vryn crossed his arms, his towering figure casting a shadow over the room. "Your fleet is in no condition to press anything, Admiral. The Zerathians bore the brunt of the Andralian assault, and our losses have been substantial. We must regroup before any further action." Calderon frowned. "If we wait too long, the Andralians will rebuild their defenses. This is our chance to end the war." Vryn's yellow eyes flashed with anger. "Do not presume to lecture me on war, human. Without my fleet, your kind would already be ash." Darius raised a hand, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "Enough. Fighting each other isn't going to win this war. We need to find a balance. Supreme Commander Vryn, your fleet has given more than its share, but the war isn't over. If we fall back now, everything we've gained will be for nothing." Vryn's gaze bore into Darius, but after a long pause he nodded. "You speak with reason, Captain Voss, but hear me clearly. The Zerathians are not your pawns. The next strike must be ours to lead." Darius inclined his head. "Agreed. Let's plan the next operation together." A fragile alliance. Outside the war room, tensions simmered between the human and Zerathian crews. In the hangar bay of the Resolute, a heated argument broke out between a group of UEF Marines and Zerathian shock troopers. "You call this a victory?" growled one of the Zerathians, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your fleet hid behind ours while we bled for this system." "We did our part," snapped Sergeant Elias Munro, stepping forward. "We hit their supply lines, took down their carriers, and neutralized their defenses. Don't act like you won this alone." The Zerathian loomed over Munro, his scaled armor glinting under the hangar lights. "If not for our strength, you wouldn't have made it past their first line of defense." Before the situation could escalate, Kerr entered the hangar, her presence immediately commanding attention. "That's enough," she barked, her tone brooking no argument. "We're on the same side. Save your anger for the Andralians." The Zerathian glared at Munro one last time before turning and walking away. Miak Kerr sighed, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "This alliance is going to tear itself apart if we're not careful." Preparing the next offensive. Despite the tensions, preparations for the next offensive continued. The target was Andralis IV, a heavily fortified industrial world critical to the Andralian war effort. Supreme Commander Vryn insisted on leading the operation, and Darius agreed to let the Zerathians take the forefront. In the strategy briefing, Vryn outlined his plan. The Zerathian fleet would launch a full-scale assault on the orbital defenses, drawing the Andralian fleet into a pitched battle. Meanwhile, UF strike teams would infiltrate the planet's surface, targeting key industrial facilities and power grids. "We must strike quickly and decisively," Vryn said. "Andralis IV is their lifeblood. If we sever it, their empire will crumble." Darius studied the holographic display. The operation was bold, perhaps too bold, but he knew Vryn's pride wouldn't allow for a more cautious approach. "It's risky," Darius said, "but it could work. If we're going to do this, we'll need to ensure our timing is perfect. Any delay could leave one side exposed." Vryn smirked. "Then ensure your people are up to the task, Captain Voss." The assault on Andralis IV. The Allied fleets emerged from hyperspace to find the Andralian defenses fully prepared. Orbital platforms armed with heavy plasma cannons surrounded the planet, and a massive Andralian fleet stood ready to repel the assault. Vryn wasted no time. The Zerathian warships surged forward, their plasma lances lighting up the void as they engaged the enemy fleet. The Requiem led the charge, its weapons tearing through Andralian cruisers with brutal efficiency. UEF strike teams, prepare for deployment, Darius ordered over the comms. Patel, bring us into position. The Resolute maneuvered through the chaos of the battle, its shields absorbing glancing blows from stray plasma bolts. Kerr and her Marines were already aboard their dropships, waiting for the signal to launch. Ground teams, you are cleared to deploy, Darius said. The dropships descended through the planet's atmosphere, weaving through a hail of anti-aircraft fire. Kerr's squad landed near one of the industrial facilities, their pulse rifles at the ready. "Move out!" Kerr shouted, leading her team into the fray. The Andralian defenders were relentless. Combat drones swarmed the Marines, their precision fire forcing the humans to take cover. Kerr barked orders, coordinating her squad's movements as they advanced through the facility. "Captain, we've reached the power grid," Kerr reported over the comms. "Setting charges now." "Understood," Darius replied. "We'll hold the line up here." A costly victory. Above the planet, the Zerathian fleet continued its brutal assault. The Requiem faced off against an Andralian battleship, the two titanic vessels exchanging devastating blows. Vrin's ship took heavy damage, but his unyielding resolve drove the Zerathians forward. "Enemy battleship neutralized," Hale reported from the Resolute's tactical station. "The Zerathians are breaking through." "Good," Darius said. "Signal Kerr to complete the operation." On the surface, Kerr's squad detonated the charges, crippling the industrial facility. Explosions rippled across the complex as power grids failed, plunging Andralis HQ into darkness. "Mission complete," Kerr said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The Allied forces began their retreat, the Zerathians covering the UEF ships as they escaped the system. The assault had been a success, but at a staggering cost. Half the Zerathian fleet had been destroyed, and the UEF had suffered significant losses on the ground. Aftermath. Back aboard the Resolute, Darius met with Vrin and Calderon in the war room. The holographic map of Andralian territory showed their empire's defenses crumbling, but the mood was somber. "This war is taking everything from us," Calderon said quietly. "How much more can we endure?" "As much as it takes," Vrin replied, his voice resolute. "The Andralians will not stop until they are utterly defeated." Darius nodded, his gaze fixed on the map. "Then we keep fighting. We've come too far to turn back now." The heart of the enemy. The victories at Melchoris and Andralis IV had shifted the balance of the war. Humanity and the Zerathians now controlled critical systems, cutting off the Andralian Union from vital resources. However, the cost of each triumph weighed heavily on both fleets, and the alliance's unity was fragile at best. Supplies ran low, morale wavered, and the Andralians were far from defeated. In the war room of the Resolute, Captain Darius Voss, Admiral Calderon, and Supreme Commander Cale Vrin studied a holographic map of Andralian space. At its center loomed their ultimate target, Andralis Prime, the capital world of the Andralian Union and the seat of their power. "Andralis Prime is a fortress," Calderon said grimly. "Its orbital defenses are the most advanced in the galaxy, and its fleet is unmatched. A direct assault would be suicide." Vrin growled, his clawed hand slamming against the table. "Then what do you propose, Admiral? That we sit here and wait for them to regain their strength? Every moment we delay, they rebuild." Darius's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. "We don't attack Andralis Prime directly. We lure their fleet away and strike where they least expect it." Calderon raised an eyebrow. "A decoy operation?" "Not just a decoy," Darius said. "A coordinated strike. We use a portion of our fleet to feint an attack on their industrial systems near Prothos. While their fleet responds, we send our most advanced ships, including the Resolute and the Requiem, straight to Andralis Prime. We bypass their outer defenses and take out their command structures. Vrin's lips curled into a faint smile. A bold plan, Captain Voss. I approve. Caleron hesitated but nodded. It's risky, but it's our best shot. Chapter 10. The Decoy. The decoy operation began with precision. A contingent of UEF and Zirathaean ships launched a massive assault on the Prothos system, striking Andralian industrial facilities with brutal efficiency. The Andralian fleet responded exactly as predicted, diverting their forces to defend the sector. On the Resolute, Darius monitored the operation with sharp focus. Their fleet is on the move, Lieutenant Joran Hale reported. They've deployed nearly 60% of their forces to Prothos. Darius nodded. Good. Patel, prepare for the jump to Andralis Prime. The Resolute, the Requiem, and a select group of elite ships initiated their hyperspace jump, leaving the decoy fleet behind. The success of the operation depended on speed and precision. Any delay could doom them all. Chapter 11. The Assault on Andralis Prime. Andralis Prime was a sight to behold. The planet glowed with the light of countless cities, its surface a tapestry of sleek towers and sprawling industrial complexes. Above it, a vast network of orbital defenses shimmered like a deadly web, bristling with automated turrets and shield generators. Enemy defenses detected, Hale said, his voice tense. They've spotted us. Darius's jaw tightened. All ships deploy countermeasures. Target their shield generators. The Allied fleet moved into action, their railguns and plasma lances tearing into the Andralian defenses. The Resolute led the charge, weaving through a hail of fire as it closed in on one of the primary shield generators. Direct hit! Hale shouted as the generator exploded in a brilliant flash. Their orbital shields are collapsing. Push forward, Darius commanded. We need to clear a path for the ground teams. Amid the chaos, the Requiem took heavy fire, its hull scorched and scarred. Supreme Commander Vrin's voice crackled over the comms. Do not falter. Victory is within our grasp. The Allied fleet pressed on, their combined firepower overwhelming the Andralian defenses. As the final orbital platform was destroyed, Darius turned his attention to the surface. Kerr, you're clear to deploy, he said over the comms. Good luck down there. Chapter 12. The Final Ground Assault. The surface of Andralis Prime was a battlefield. Commander Alina Kerr and her Marines landed amid fierce resistance, their dropships dodging anti-aircraft fire as they descended. The Andralian defenders were relentless, their combat drones and mechanized units swarming the landing zones. Stay in formation, Kerr shouted, her pulse rifle blazing. We push through to the central command tower. The Marines fought with grim determination, their movements coordinated and precise. Zirathaean shock troopers supported them, their massive exosuits cutting through the Andralian forces like scythes. As the Allied ground forces advanced, Kerr's team reached the base of the command tower, a towering structure that housed the Andralian Union's leadership and strategic systems. Charges on the support columns, Kerr ordered. We bring this whole thing down. The Marines worked quickly, placing explosives as Andralian reinforcements closed in. Plasma bolts rained down on their position, forcing them to take cover. Captain, we're pinned down, Kerr shouted over the comms. We need air support. Chapter 13. Darius's Gambit. Back on the Resolute, Darius made a fateful decision. Patel, bring us into low orbit. We're giving them the support they need. Captain, that's dangerously close to their surface defenses, Hale warned. We don't have a choice, Darius replied. If Kerr's team fails, this mission is over. The Resolute descended into the planet's atmosphere, its railguns firing on Andralian positions near the command tower. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the enemy lines, giving Kerr's team the opening they needed. "The charges are set," Kerr reported. "Detonating now." The command tower collapsed in a massive explosion, the Andralian leadership crushed beneath the rubble. The remaining Andralian forces on the surface faltered, their coordination shattered. Chapter 14. The Fall of the Andralian Union. With Andralis Prime in flames and their leadership destroyed, the Andralian Union crumbled. Across the galaxy, their remaining fleets surrendered, their officers unwilling to fight a war they could no longer win. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew erupted into cheers as the news spread. Darius stood at the center of it all, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," Hale said, his voice filled with awe. "It's over." Darius nodded slowly. "It's over." Epilogue: The stars we claimed. Months after the war's end, the galaxy began to rebuild. Humanity and the Zyrathians forged a lasting alliance, their partnership reshaping the political landscape. The scars of war remained, but so did the hope for a better future. On Earth, Darius stood in a quiet garden, overlooking the rebuilt city of New Jakarta. Commander Kerr joined him, her arm still in a sling from her injuries on Andralis Prime. "Hard to believe it's finally over," Kerr said, her voice soft. Darius nodded, his gaze distant. "We won the war, but the real work is just beginning. We have a galaxy to rebuild." Kerr smiled faintly. "If anyone can do it, it's you." Darius turned to face her, a rare smile breaking through his stoic exterior. "Not just me. All of us." As the sun set over the horizon, Darius felt a sense of peace for the first time in years. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and the future was theirs to shape.